Matthew chapter 8, verses 14 to 27. When Jesus came into Peter's house, he saw Peter's mother-in-law lying in bed with a fever. He touched her hand, and the fever left her, and she got up and began to wait on him. When evening came, many who were demon-possessed were brought to him, and he drove out the spirits with a word and healed all the sick. This was to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet Isaiah. He took up our infirmities and bore our diseases. When Jesus saw the crowd around him, he gave orders to cross to the other side of the lake. Then a teacher of the law came to him and said, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." Jesus replied, "Foxes have dens and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head." Another disciple said to him, "Lord, first let me go and bury my father." But Jesus told him, "Follow me and let the dead bury their own dead." Then he got into the boat, and his disciples followed him. Suddenly a furious storm came up on the lake, so that the waves swept over the boat. But Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him, saying, "Lord, save us, we're going to drown." He replied, "You of little faith, why are you so afraid?" Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. The men were amazed and asked, "What kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him." It's the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. So, of course, we are still in the season of Lent. It is coming to the end, though. It's coming very close. Lent, of course, is a 40-day journey, not counting Sundays, from Ash Wednesday through Maundy Thursday. And we're in a series entitled, "Come Follow Me, A Disciple's Journey Through Lent." So let's kind of do a recap here. So far, we have talked about the baptism of Jesus. Then we followed Jesus out into the desert where he was tempted by the devil. Then we heard Jesus talk about the Beatitudes and being the salt and the light. Last week, Jesus talked about doing the right things for the right reasons. And this week, Jesus shares about what it costs to be a disciple. And I'm specifically looking at Matthew 8, 19 to 22. In fact, the heading in my Bible says, "The Cost of Following Jesus." Now, as we look at just these few verses here, 18 to 22, some people, and I kind of agree to some extent, it seems like Jesus is kind of callous here. He's not real sympathetic, it seems like. He kind of shuts these guys down pretty quick, right? Because one guy comes up and says, "Jesus, I will follow you wherever you want. Wherever you go, I'm right there with you." And Jesus is like, "So just so you know, you ain't going to find a bed when you go with me. There's no guarantee you're going to have a roof over your head if you follow me." Then the second guy, "Lord, let me go and bury my father." Yeah, let the dead take care of their dead. Now, he didn't say it exactly like that, but that's what he said, wasn't it? He said, let the dead take care of the dead. And again, it almost seems kind of callous, kind of rude, kind of, to some extent, disrespectful to these people, trying to do the right thing for the right reasons. But what he's telling them, what he's reminding them, is the cost. What it's going to cost to follow him. If you follow me, Jesus is saying, I'm all you got. I'm it. Do I have your undivided attention? Are you ready to be a disciple, a true disciple? And see, the point isn't whether or not they decide to follow Jesus, but it's to define what genuine discipleship is. Genuine discipleship consists of, one, being ready to suffer as Jesus suffered, and two, determined to forsake everything else that stands in the way of following Jesus. Well, but why can't Jesus wait? Why can't this guy who wants to follow Jesus follow, in a few days? Why can't he catch up later? What's the big deal? Well, I think Jesus was trying to make sure that we caught the point, that everybody caught the point of an issue back then and still an issue to this day. It's an issue, a common issue for a lot of people that claim to follow Jesus. Something always delays us. Something always gets in the way of our discipleship. Because he was saying, if this guy can allow this one thing to get in his way, what's to say that something else isn't going to get in the way tomorrow or the day after or the day after? Well, I've got to take care of my dad this day, but I'll start tomorrow. Then tomorrow comes. Well, I've got to settle the estate. You know what a work that is. Got to talk to the lawyers and all that stuff. Then the next day, well, I've got to go through the house and clean out everything. Delay, delay, delay. Something is always going to come up. Something is always going to compete for our time and our attention in this life. And here's the thing. We allow this to happen. We allow things to delay us. We tell ourselves that we're not quitting on Jesus. We're not going to allow these things, no matter how important they are, to get in the way, and yet we do. Tomorrow will be better. You know the number one day for starting diets? Tomorrow. Tomorrow. They actually surveyed people. I thought this was kind of weird. Some like to say, well, January 1st, because that's, New Year's resolution. Or I'll start my diet on Monday. But the number one answer is tomorrow. Tomorrow I will do this. Tomorrow I'll do that. But you know what? Tomorrow never comes, does it? Tomorrow always is delayed. Tomorrow we'll fully commit to Jesus, but not today. I'm busy. Tomorrow I'll leave the house, like this guy says, and cross the sea. But we can't do it today. There's pressing issues today. Something else always comes up. What is important in your life? How do you spend your time? And honestly, this is a really important thing to consider. As I've mentioned before, Lent is a time of self-examination. To really be truthful and honest with yourself and with God, but honestly, honesty is hardest when it's coming from ourselves. When we're honest and open with ourselves, you're always going to have things come up. Well, these other things are planned and I have to attend to them. But what dictates what is more important? I mean, again, seriously consider that. How do you define what is really important? I want you to think about what it takes to being committed, really committed to something. On July 4th, 1776, kind of a famous date, John Adams said in an address to the Continental Congress, he said, "Live or die, sink or swim, survive or perish. I am committed to this Declaration of Independence. I am committed, and if God wills it, I am ready to die that this nation may be free." He was committed until death, is what he said. Now, I want us to consider this. Being a Christian is about accepting Christ into your heart. That is actually relatively easy in comparison to being a disciple. That's something else. John Adams kind of alluded to this, but we hear that question a lot. Would you die for this? Maybe you've heard, would you die for Christ? And we maybe consider that idea when we think about all the martyrs who have actually died for their faith, who have put their lives on the line and willing to say, yes, I will die for Christ. But I want to ask a different question. I think it's actually a better question for us nowadays. Are you willing to live for Christ? That's actually a better question. Will you commit to being a true disciple? Because who sets priorities? Who sets commitments in our lives? We do. Nobody else sets them. Now you may say, well, I have a job. Yeah, but you're setting the priority to do that job, right? Now I'm not saying it's easy, don't get me wrong. And I'm certainly not encouraging anybody to necessarily quit their job. But who sets the priorities? Who sets the commitments? Now I've heard people say, well, I cannot do something. I can't do that. I can't do that. Sometimes that's completely valid. It's completely respectful, and I understand that. But during this time of Lent, let's be intentional about making sure that it's not I choose not to, rather than I can't. Because there is a difference. Well, I can't fly a plane. It's not because I don't choose to. Actually, there's a lot of other people that choose that I not try to do that. Right? But I don't have the skill set. I don't have the training for that. If I say I choose not to go visit somebody, I'm making the choice to do that. Let's be honest. Let's really and truthfully consider what it means to be committed. Pastor Marshall Shelley said, commitment is not simply a mental attitude. It's developing an ability to further the cause you're committed to. Now, honestly, it's not going to be easy to follow Christ. To be a disciple, it's not easy. In fact, it's guaranteed to not be easy. It's going to be a rough road, and honestly, our lives get thrown into chaos when we do, because we're changing the way we see things. We do things for the right reasons, the right purpose, because we're following Christ, and Christ himself threw the world into chaos. In his time, he threw it into chaos. So it's not like it's going to change. It's going to be easier now for us. It's going to be a rough road. And things maybe you think, well, it's not really worth it. But if you put it in the perspective of the world, yeah, the world's going to say it's totally not worth it. But also we know that sometimes you need to tear down before you can build back up again. And build back up again with a better foundation, better material, better structure around you. We have to consider, are we going to share the gospel message? Are we going to love others, even if they don't look, think, or love like us? Will you show up to serve? Because it's hard to serve if you don't show up. It's like somebody who works out. Whether it's going to the gym and you're lifting weights and you have a spotter, or whether you go out for a run. How does it help? Or what helps the most? Somebody alongside you, somebody with you, pushing you and saying, you can do it, you can do it. Yeah, I know this sucks, you can do it. Because sometimes we need some encouragement. Because the road is rough. It's not comfortable. It's not fun sometimes. But we need to be able to do that. But sometimes we need an even better visual aid. Can I get a volunteer to come forward? I'll need another one, but come here. That's a pretty lamp, isn't it? You like that? But it's not really doing what a lamp's supposed to do, right? Lamp's supposed to do what? Light up. Light up, exactly. Could you turn it on for me, please? Anytime now. Go ahead and turn it on. Oh. Yeah. Come on. No, that's the switch. Yeah, turned on. Why is it not working?
It's not plugged in.
It's not plugged in. That's right. It isn't. You know what we need? We need somebody else to come up and help us. What about your dad? You think your dad would come up and help us? I bet he would too. You take that around to her, please. Go ahead and plug it in. Why don't you try turning it on now? It works. I know, right? It's much more fun when they're little and they don't give me sarcastic looks. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Yes, let's thank our lovely assistants. The point being is that's a pretty lamp. But until it actually gets plugged in, it doesn't fulfill its purpose. And what did it need? It needed help. It needed an additional connection that was provided by somebody else. Making that power actually work. Making that connection actually work. It took two people. That cord is too short to reach to an outlet. But when we have an extension cord, when we have an additional piece of the puzzle, it works together. And not only does it talk about, do we consider coming up and showing up to serve, but showing up just for Sunday morning. Showing up for church and connecting with people and having fellowship and encouraging people. Because some people may say, well, such and such, they didn't show up, so I'm not going to worry about it either. And I'm not saying because I want people in the seats, because I want my numbers to look good, because I turn in the attendance every week, just in case you know. I turn in attendance. That's not a big deal to me. But it's because of your own spiritual growth that I want you here. Your own connection to others that will encourage their spiritual growth. That connection, that vitality that comes with a congregation, with a church that meets and connects together. That lifts each other up, that encourages each other, that has fun, that laughs. That Proverbs reading, what did it say? As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. We need each other to sharpen each other so we can be the best we can be. Nobody wants a dull knife, right? Not only is a dull knife have a tendency to be ineffective, a dull knife can be dangerous. If we don't have others alongside us, encouraging us, walking alongside us, keeping us sharp, we can be dangerous too. So let's figure out how we can be truly and honestly committed to being a disciple. Here's the thing. Here's what I want to ask you, and this is my challenge. Ask yourself honestly, am I really committed to being a disciple of Jesus Christ? Be honest. If you're not, admit that. That's a great first step. That's a wonderful first step, because what do they say? The first step is admitting that you have a problem, a struggle, an issue. Okay, great. Where do we go from there? That's where your church family comes together, lifts you up, encourages you, walks alongside. See me, but there's also a lot of wonderful people here that can lift you up and walk alongside you, not because any of us are better than you, or are more intelligent or anything like that. It's just because we can walk together. We can lift each other up. We can lean against each other. So consider that. Am I really committed to being a disciple of Jesus Christ? So during our final song, I want to open up the opportunity to come forward. Again, we would call this an altar call, but we don't have to call it that. You can go up to the kneeling bench. You can go to the chairs, whatever you want to. You can come forward and pray. I will pray with you. You can bring somebody else up to pray with you. You don't have to. I'm not making this a requirement for anybody. But if you feel called to, I want to open that up. And I'm going to do this every Sunday of Lent. Inviting you to come forward. It's just an acknowledgement of saying that action needs to take place in my life. I've come to the altar a lot of times. It's not a one and done type of thing. So I want you to consider Lamentations 3:40. Let us examine and probe our ways, and let us return to the Lord. Let's bow our heads.